Hello guys and gals, me Mudahar, and boy, we're gonna have to fire the red alerts here. You know, I love emulation. I always talk about emulating, and you know what? For the few Nintendo, fans in the audience who are like, wow, I can't believe this guy just blatantly supports piracy on the internet. Ladies and gentlemen, emulation is first and foremost a preservation tool, okay? So I'm gonna show you guys something, for some of the haters. This is a copy of Tears of the Kingdom. Ooh, the new Legend of Zelda game on the Switch, right? Probably one of the better games this year. And while I'm not the craziest, biggest fan of this game, I definitely, I would say enjoyed my time playing it. Point is, I did not play this on a Nintendo Switch. You know why I didn't play it on a Nintendo Switch? Because it doesn't run at the frame rate that I want, and it also doesn't run as clear as I want. So what I did was I put it into a hacked Switch, backed up to the ROM, copied it over to my computer, and ran it through an emulator known as Yuzu at 4K, ultra-wide, 60 frames a second. And the best part is, using something known as SyncThing, I was actually able to cross-save between the PC version and my Steam Deck, which runs the game at Switch's spec, so 30 frames, 720. And on the go, I was able to play, Legend of Zelda on the airplane, and when I came back to my big boy computer, 5 seconds is all it took to take the save file from here back to my computer so I could immediately play the game, right there and then. So I love the fact that I can play these games without the Switch. And the best part about it is, the emulation preserves this game. That means I don't need a Nintendo Switch, and the best part is, I don't need to pay Nintendo to cloud back up my games. Oh wow! Oh, Nintendo Switch membership gives you free saves! I don't care! I could do it myself, alright? God damn! So again, for me it's a preservation tool, and it goes for really any console. When I'm playing PS2 games or PlayStation 1 games like Tomba 2, I love to have actual backups, okay? Because that means I don't rely on pieces of hardware to preserve my favorite gaming memories. And that's pretty much the reason why I use emulators. Now, anti-piracy and emulation anti-piracy is a real thing. So to understand, I'm going to take you through a little bit of a history tour. This is MetaFortress. MetaFortress enables software developers to easily protect applications against piracy, subversions, and anti-tampering. And they pretty much talk about working with major games customers with over $1 billion in revenue. That tells us that successful piracy protection increases their top-line revenue by 50%. Basically, what they mean is, typically within the first 2 weeks of a game being out, the fact that you can have a good antivirus and prevent as many people from downloading is great, because most sales are done in that initial first month period. After that, sales taper off, and sometimes games will just remove DRM once they've been past that initial sales period. Now, this was initially popularized because back then, there were cards known as the R4 card, the flash cards for Nintendo DS, and later on the 3DS, which allowed people to download ROMs off the internet, put them onto the R4, and play them on an actual DS as if they were legitimately bought games. Now, even on the Wii, the original Wii, you could USB load, hacked games if you wanted to. Actually, jailbreaking a Wii was probably one of the easiest things next to an original Sony PSP. So, because of all this, there was actual DRM put into games that, I shit you not, believe it or not, games like the Smurfs Dance Party. Now, why the fuck would somebody want to play the Smurfs Dance Party in the first place? The game alone is a DRM. Oh wow, you want to play Smurfs Dance Party at my house? No, and we're not friends anymore. Now, there were other games like Kirby Return to Dreamland, but basically, if you fired up the game, and people found this out in an emulator known as Dolphin, that they would get MetaFortress Response. Now, this took a couple days to create a patch and work around this. Because basically what emulation anti-DRM does is it checks for specific calls, certain calls, and it basically checks for timings. It tries to figure out if the piece of hardware you're running on is shitty enough, and if you're running on something better, something a little more responsive, you're probably on an emulator. And that's where calls get tripped, DRM gets tripped, and you have a big frowny face. Now, for most people, they didn't really give a shit about playing this crap in the first place. Honestly, the emulators just caught strays. So because we could patch this easily, this wasn't really that big of a deal. Other games like Chrono Trigger on the Super Nintendo or the DS would freeze as soon as you see this time gate screen, right? They would just infinitely loop. That's because if you're running it on pirated carts or whatnot, it would just not work. Of course, emulators and patches get rid of this immediately. Now, the reason I'm making this video and I'm talking about it in specific is because Erdito, the company behind Denuvo, actually decided to be the top tier protection for Nintendo Switch, the middleware. Middleware is basically a nice way of saying DRM, in between your game and you. Now, they boast here that they're authorized in Nintendo Switch middleware, while blatantly using what I believe to be AI art, which also has a interesting interesting situation around copyright abuse, right? But again, if this is not AI art for any imagination, and again, it looks a lot like AI art, you're looking at like weird hands stretched out, these mountains don't make any sense. If this is not AI art, please fire your fucking artist, because my god, they are terrible. Or at least ask the company that you're working with for some goddamn art in the first place. Don't just use the AI art, it's shit. It always looks like shit, everyone can tell it. So anyways, they come at us with the global leader in providing security solutions for video games on desktop, console, mobile platforms. And they're now available on the Nintendo Developer Portal. So again, they basically, what they've said here is even if a game is protected against piracy on its PC version, the version released on Nintendo Switch can be emulated from day one and played on PC, therefore bypassing the strong protections offered by the PC version. So what they're actually saying over here is, let's say a game like Persona 5 Royale gets released on the PC and the Nintendo Switch. Now on the PC, they'll have DRM, they'll have Denuvo, and it may be really difficult to crack that. Denuvo is a very difficult DRM to crack, and a lot of games that have Denuvo DRM usually remain uncracked because there's not a lot of people behind the scenes that are working on it. And also, it's just a complicated mess. So what'll happen is, if somebody can't pirate the PC version, what they're claiming is they'll just download the Switch ROM of Persona 5 Royale and emulate it underneath Yuzu or Ryujinx, which makes sense, right? Like, if somebody wants to play the game, yeah, they'll have to play it at a lower frame rate, maybe lower resolution, maybe reduced graphical features, but Persona 5 Royale is pretty much the same fucking game between the PC version and the Switch. So that's what they're basically alleging. By blocking unauthorized emulations on PC, studios are able to increase their revenue during the game's launch window, which is the most important period for monetization. So again, this is also really relevant because when games like Sonic Frontiers came out, a lot of people were just downloading the Switch ROM on the PC and emulating it so they could play the game even if they didn't own a Switch in the first place, which is obviously bad. These are not negative points that they're bringing up here. This is just actual facts, okay? I know that people want to be protective of emulation, and they always want to just separate emulation and piracy, but unfortunately, there are a lot of bad people out there that use emulation for pirate methods, okay? And again, it's fair to discuss this. So, as with all Denuvo solutions, this technology integrates seamlessly into the build toolchain, with no impact on the gaming experience. It then allows for the insertion of checks into the codes, which blocks gameplay on emulators. So like I showed earlier with Meta Fortress, what they're effectively doing is checking for timings, checking basically if the hardware is, shitty like the Switch, versus good like most people's top-end emulator systems, right? So again, the other big reality here is when they say it does not affect the gaming experience, that is a bit questionable. For instance, way back when Resident Evil Village dropped on the PC, Digital Foundry made a video where they showcased that the cracked version of the game ran better than the stock version of the game that had Denuvo. So here you can see the cracked version of the game is in times running significantly higher than the stock version of the game. And there's also a stutter that you have to worry about too. In fact, this graph shows you that this green line, which is the cracked version of the game, does not appear to have any stuttering. The stock version of the game is stuttering like hell. So there are some issues, and Capcom obviously did address this later on, but it shows you that in certain cases, a cracked version of the game without Denuvo may perform better. Again, this is a game-by-game basis, and not every game has this level of effect by the DRM. Denuvo is something that should be assessed for every single game out there. If you look at certain games like Assassin's Creed Origins, from what I recall back when I played it, I really didn't have any performance issues. Resident Evil Village, I didn't buy it on PC, so I can't really comment too much on this situation. But this is kind of how DRM works. There's never going to be a case where DRM does not have some impact on a video game. Now, the reason why people are worried about it on the Switch is if this comes to the actual Nintendo Switch, a system that is already being tapped out for its hardware by a lot of these games that are coming out, what is Denuvo going to do? Are we going to get into single-digit frame rates? I'm probably going to say no, simply because these are checks on the hardware, and they're not going to be. I don't think they're going to be, stressing the system more than it already is. Enough for anybody to see any tangible difference. That is said, however, I'm sure they're getting this lined up for the Switch 2 or anything that comes out later on. Again, the Switch's biggest problem was actually being cracked day one. Most of the piracy for the Nintendo Switch, from what I've seen, are people who have old first generation Switches that have the hardware exploit. They simply just, load up the ROMs right there and play these games on the Switch hacked. That's what I've seen for the most part. In fact, for emulation, for people who are buying bigger rigs that are already emulating these games at 4K 60, for them, buying a Switch and buying the game is not so much a difficult, daunting task. I'd say that most of the actual piracy actually happens with, current first generation Switches, which cannot be patched, that are sitting out in the wild in the millions. So for Denuvo to come in and just basically come in and stamp down on the emulation front is a bit dangerous. Now, again, if Denuvo comes in and this becomes an issue for emulation enthusiasts may lose the chance to back up and preserve some of their big popular games. For instance, Metroid Prime 4, which is going to drop, that I had 1000% intentions for playing on an emulator, may be in threat by this. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, the point is, Denuvo can go fuck itself. This kind of DRM protection only serves to inconvenience the actual gamer instead. Because I'll tell you right now, most of the emulation front, if this is actually brought on, I can foresee this being patched in like a week, maybe a month at times. We are getting to the point where when a Switch game drops, it is literally day zero playable on a PC as it is on a Nintendo Switch. It's absolutely wild, the world that we're living in. And if I have the choice as a gamer to play at better frame rates, better resolutions, you bet your fucking ass that I'm going to be loading up on an emulator. And if Denuvo or Dito wants to come in and just stomp that dream out, well, keep trying, okay? Because this is a story that's happened for time forever when it comes to video games. And almost always, it continues to fail. Ladies and gentlemen, let me know what you think about this in the comment section below. If you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike it or dislike it, I am out.